With a nearly perfect multi-link, multi-finished bracelet with a tungsten bezel, a Swiss movement, a malachite dial, this watch is almost too good to go in the ocean, though it does have 200 meters of water resistance. Today, we are looking at the Venezianico Nereide Malachite. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Chase, and this is All Things Random, mostly watch reviews with some random stuff sprinkled in between. Today, we are looking at this beautiful dive watch coming in with 200 meters of water resistance. Like I said, it's almost too good to go in the ocean. We'll talk about my opinions on this watch at the very end, but if you're here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does show people that you're watching my videos, so maybe the watch companies will send me more watches to then bring content to you guys. As always, the details first, then as always, my opinion at the very end. Now from the outside in, the watch comes in at 42 millimeters in diameter, a lug to lug or overall footprint of 49 millimeters, a case thickness of 12.5, and a lug width or strap width of 22 millimeters. The bracelet is a 5-link bracelet, alternating finishing with brushed, then high polished, then brushed, then high polished throughout those 5 links. The links are actually slightly upward, which is quite unique to most dive watches. Most micro brands want to stick to the oyster link style. This, I think, is quite bold and well executed, tapering down to a beautiful fold-over clasp. The clasp is a double pusher, proper milled clasp with 4 levels of micro adjustment along the side. It does have that high polished raised center with the Venezianico cross. Now right off the bat, you can see that there is some minor scratching on that high polished clasp. Now this is gonna be, it's not even a con, this is just what wearing a watch does. Now, I'm going to be honest, I haven't actually worn this watch out in the wild because I wanted it to be as pristine as possible for this video. Now, the scratching on the clasp is simply from placing it on wood surfaces and stuff like that. Not like tile or anything like that, but just basic, like moving it back and forth, and it scratched. Now, it's a 316L stainless steel clasp. It's going to be like that for anything, so keep that in mind. Watches are meant to be worn. They're going to be scratched. I was just slightly depressed because it scratched so easily, but then it's high polished on the bottom side of your wrist. So anytime you put your wrist down, it's going to scratch. It's just the nature of having that. Does it look good? Yes, it looks great because of the multi-finishing of the entire watch. It's necessary to have that high polish, and it reminds me of a watch that we'll talk about at the very end. The case is 316L stainless steel. It's brushed all the way around with chamfered edges, adding a detail of finishing that wasn't necessary but works very well with the overall design and display of the watch. The bezel is a 120 click unidirectional bezel, and when you rotate the bezel, it really does remind me of the sound of a Rolex Submariner. It's very nice, very smooth, and engages extremely well. Now the bezel insert is tungsten, which is the first time I've ever held a watch with such a bezel. Even Rolex sticks with ceramic, which we all know essentially is scratch resistant, but tungsten is far harder, far more scratch resistant, and gives a very nice break from the mundane that we're all used to. Now when comparing tungsten to ceramic, we all know that, again, ceramic is scratch resistant. You see them on the brand new dive watches out there, to include Rolexes, and they are essentially scratch resistant for life. Well, tungsten is even more scratch resistant than ceramic and far more durable because it's not ceramic, it's a metal. So it's going to take a beating a lot better than the ceramic would, because ceramic technically can shatter. Now, tungsten can also shatter, and I know that because I wear a tungsten wedding ring. And on my Italian honeymoon, I dropped my original wedding ring on tile in Rome, and it actually cracked and it splintered off and I had to get a new ring. I still have that ring. It didn't break all the way, but that's also an issue with tungsten. But tungsten is far harder than ceramic and far more scratch resistant. And it gives a different look. It gives a different look than you'd see in any other bezel. Now, this is a high polished mirrored bezel, which you don't see everywhere. And it does give a pop to the eye. And it does really, and I say this a lot in videos, but it really does bring the eyes down because it's so engaging with the light. It actually makes it kind of hard to film. Again, talk about that at the very end. Covering the dial is a piece of dead, flat sapphire crystal with AR coating or anti-reflective coating, high polished batons as the indices, beautifully done, sword hands, of course, loomed, and a beautiful malachite dial. Malachite is a type of mineral, we'll get into that you don't see on many watches. In fact, I would say you see malachite on less watches than something like meteorite or something like mother of pearl. And there's a reason for that. Well, that's because malachite is a very fragile mineral to work with. You can see along the dial, it has these lines that are called veins. Now, those veins are extremely fragile, and when it's being cut at 0.4 millimeters thick for the dial itself, it has a tendency to fracture, it has a tendency to splinter, and it has a tendency to break. Well, because of that, only a true skilled craftsman can cut malachite, which makes this a more rare dial than, like I said before, a meteorite dial, which is something from space. Now, malachite is known for its intense green with, of course, those unique veins that I just mentioned that run through the stone. Now, they didn't overly clutter the dial with the signature cross just below the 12, Venezianico, the name brand, just below that, and of course, Nereide and malachite just above the 6. A high polished frame around the date window at the 3 o'clock position, and inside is the Sellita SW200 automatic movement. Now, the SW200 is a 26 joule automatic movement offering about 40 hours of power reserve with a beat rate of 28,800 vibrations an hour, allowing that second hand to tick smoothly at 8 ticks a second. The lume on this watch is quite good with BGW9 Super Luminova, giving it a nice, brilliant, long-lasting display in the darkness. On the back side of the watch is a screw-down case back. This watch offers 200 meters of water resistance, and it is a proper dive watch with a screw-down crown that is very nicely done. Etched on the back of the case is a beautiful underwater submarine. On my 7¼ inch wrist, you can see that this watch, measuring at 42 millimeters in diameter, actually doesn't fit quite like a 42 millimeter diameter watch because of the lug-to-lug and overall footprint of 49 millimeters. This means it wears more like a 40 or 41 millimeter wrist. However, if you are a slightly smaller person, maybe a wrist under 7 inches, this watch may fit kind of big. But my average sized wrist or anything slightly bigger, this watch is going to fit perfectly. And here comes in my personal opinions about the watch. Now, this is one of the things they could truly dial in any future watches is simply the dimensions of the watch. Instead of a 42 millimeter watch, they could go down to a 41 millimeter watch or a 40 millimeter watch and make it more wearable for the average everyday person. That being said, they did keep the overall lug-to-lug pretty small at 49 millimeters, but if they brought the case size down to 40 millimeters, the lug-to-lug down to 47 millimeters, and kept the thickness of 12.5, but a lug width or strap width of 20, right? That sweet spot that is the dive watch. I think that this thing would be a 10 out of 10 instead of like an 8.5 out of 10. Now, overall, the watch is done quite nicely, right? It's beautifully designed. Great materials used. The finishing is very well done, and I think the quality control is right on point. When I got into the macro photography, got super close up to the dial. Now, I didn't realize that the malachite dial actually has more of a mirror polish to it, which made kind of almost like an enamel dial reflective surface with that green and the veins beneath it. So that was quite interesting. It actually gave more depth than I was actually expecting. The chapter ring around the dial is a separate piece that goes on top, so it doesn't affect the malachite dial. And the batons, the double batons, the 12 singles all the way around, I think was done also quite nicely. The printing is done perfectly. I think the bracelet is one of the things that surprised me the most because of its unique link shape. You really don't see any uniqueness when it comes to bracelets, especially in micro brands, and it's nice, and it's just a breath of fresh air to see something different and executed as good as they did. Now, we could always complain that there's not a micro adjustment on the fly like the classic Rolex Glide Lock clasp that's out there. That just makes things super convenient, but there are plenty of micro adjustment points on the clasp already, and it doesn't take much but a paper clip to really adjust it, and you can find a paper clip anywhere or something similar. So that's really not a negative, and it's really not a con, it's just an observation. They could have put a Glide Lock style clasp or a micro adjustment on the fly, but it's not a deal breaker by any means. Now, I mentioned that this reminds me of a watch in the luxury market that I would compare this similarly to. So it has that tungsten bezel that's high polished, looks great, has a malachite dial that also is beautiful. The high polished alternating finishes of the bracelet, of the clasp, of the case reminds me similarly, now stick with me, of like the Yachtmaster from Rolex. You have the Submariner, then you have the Yachtmaster. I'm not talking about the Yachtmaster 2, the Yachtmaster, something with like the platinum bezel. This thing reminds me, that's why I said in the beginning, this is almost too beautiful to go in the ocean. This thing is 200 meters of water resistance, is a true dive watch, and can be used to scuba dive, but it's almost too beautiful for that. Like, this thing is gonna look great if you're wearing a suit, if you're wearing like a nice sweater, even if you're wearing like a polo and some shorts, this thing is gonna fit in almost anywhere. And again, it just reminds me of the Rolex Yachtmaster. It is like a level above the standard dive watch. Like, instead of buying a dive watch, you're like, I'm buying a luxury dive watch that is capable of diving, but it's also capable of actually being worn in a suit and dressed up. And that has to do with the high polished finishing on different parts of the watch. The high polished tungsten bezel gives it a very nice shine from above. The chamfered edges gives it a nice pop from the side, and the multi-finishing on the bracelet and the clasp also gives it a kind of a brilliant pop as your wrists move. That to me says more dressy, but then it is a sports watch because it's a dive watch. So to me, it is like buying that Rolex Yachtmaster and saying, you know what, I could have got a dive watch, but instead I got a dive-like watch that has better materials on it, and it's more like a flex to those who wear sports watches. If that makes any sense. Anyway, I would love to hear your guys' opinion down in the comments below. What do you guys think about the dial? What do you guys think about the brand? I love what they're doing. If you guys go on the website, I'll link it down below. They have a lot of different models. If you don't like the dive watch, they do have some pretty nice dress watches. I did do a review on an aventurine dial from them. I do have the Musso Black, that super black dial that I purchased myself that I have sitting here, and I'm gonna try to put together a pretty good video for that. I'm trying to grow the channel and do better videography and different shots for you guys. So I'm gonna basically be releasing a video once a week, so I get a little more time to actually put into the photography and overall review of the watch. So hopefully the goal is a video every Friday. So do me a favor. One, hit the subscribe button. Again, I'm gonna shill that out all the time. Hit the subscribe button, it's free. Hit the like button, leave a comment down below, and hit that notification bell so you guys are notified when I drop these videos. And let's give Venezianico some support because they are doing quite nice things in the watch world. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.